Hello and welcome to Working Together. In this series of interviews, we explore the value of collaboration, cooperation and co-working in business and speak to some really inspiring business people to learn how collaboration supported their business journey. If you don't know me already, my name's Beth. I'm the Ops Manager at The Projects, which is Brighton's independent co-working members club. We have an online and offline space to help entrepreneurs and small business owners make their vision a reality with resources, events, training and the incredible support of a very passionate community. Our philosophy that guides everything that we do is that beautiful things happen when we work together. This week, I'm really excited to be chatting to Kelvin Newman. He is the founder and managing director of Rough Agenda, which is the events company behind a range of awesome marketing events, including BrightonSEO, which has gone from being a tiny gathering above a pub to the biggest search event in Europe. Not a bad achievement, that, Kelvin. You must be pretty happy with that.
We're really pleased with the journey we've been on. It's interesting, actually. So it's like our 10th anniversary of the first Brighton SEO event this year. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting kind of point in the journey. 10 years that we've gone, and it's gone from being like a kind of a side project, a small thing, to my full-time job, to a company's main thing we focus on. So yeah, it's an interesting journey that we've gone along there.
Yeah, and so where did the idea for it all originally come from?
So, I mean, originally, we tell the story that we had a hashtag before we had an event. And, in the early days of Twitter, or early-ish days of Twitter, the people who are interested in SEO who happen to be in Brighton used that hashtag as a means of sort of kind of communicating, to people that they hadn't yet followed. And there had been a few sort of informal meetups, either where there's a London group that had been around for a little while called London SEO. They came down to Brighton for an evening for some drinks, and there's some various kind of informal meetups that sort of occurred around that as well. And I kind of took over and organised a small sort of like half-day mini meetup, for want of a better description, in the upstairs room of the Quadrant, so the pub by the clock tower. And yeah, kind of we booked the room there. On a Friday afternoon, we had 5 or 6 sort of speakers lined up, a projector we hastily kind of borrowed from Wired Sussex that afternoon that we kind of projected onto a wonky flip chart that we kind of propped up on a chair in the corner. And yeah, we kind of we were expecting maybe, I think we had the 5 or 6 speakers. I maybe thought we'd maybe get 20 extra people there. And then we ended up standing room only, kind of more people than there were room for. So we thought, there's obviously something here that kind of works. I mean, obviously there was a bit of money behind the bar, so people are coming along for a free drink. But we kind of went, okay, in 6 months' time we'll do it again, and kind of booked a slightly bigger space. That time it was about room for about 100 people, 120 people showed up, and then just kind of each time, every 6 months or so, so I booked a slightly larger space, and eventually went from being a half-day event to a full-day event to a day of training happening the day beforehand. And yeah, we find ourselves now in the Brighton Centre, which is the largest sort of conference space in Brighton, and a variety of kind of the hotels and cinemas and various places nearby. And yeah, we get about 5,000 people twice a year when the event happens in person, from 40 different countries coming along to meet, learn, and we say kind of just do your job a little bit better, really. So yeah, it's kind of been this kind of force of nature where obviously we've got a plan and a strategy for trying to grow it, but a lot of it's just been kind of like responding to the affection that our community has got for the event, and kind of taking what they like and doing more of it, and sort of, I suppose, constantly trying to refine it and do a little bit better job than we did 6 months previously.
It's just a phenomenal success, and it's such an amazing sort of landmark event in the Brighton events calendar and the European events calendar. And I've been along, and I just think I can't imagine for you, who started that in a above the Quadrant to being at the Brighton Centre. It's such a cheesy question, but you kind of just go, you pinch yourself, and are you able to kind of look back and go, whoa, that is amazing?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, we're very proud of the achievement, and we kind of, a little bit's my ego, right? So it's kind of, there are certain, as you kind of, develop and progress in your career, you start to kind of see things in, your personality and your kind of background and approach, and that's kind of reflected in your career and the path that you take, right? And, you know, like mine was always, the event started off, you know, initially just because it was a laugh to do, but then it was kind of going, well, people going, not thinking it couldn't be any more than that. So kind of there's a little bit of that process of kind of going, yeah, actually, I think it could be bigger. I think we could do a bit better job than we did before. And I think that sort of desire to try and, you know, one up ourselves in the past is a big part of how we got there. So yeah, I mean, we look back and see how it is, but it's 10 years. It's also a very long time. So it's this, you know, it doesn't feel like it in the process. It doesn't feel that long ago that we were doing it, but yeah, there's, you know, big, you know, businesses grow, right? Don't they? And events are an interesting one because sometimes there's maybe not a temptation, but they quite quickly set upon a formula for how that event is going to work, or a kind of, we're always intended to fit a certain way an event should be. And I don't think there was anything fundamentally in the early stages of Brighton SEO that made it any different from any of the hundreds of meetups that occur in any weeknight in any UK city. But I think just we had a slightly different, obviously we were fortunate, and, you know, there's things that we did that allowed us to grow, but I think it was just like we were prepared. We wanted to try and do something a little bit bigger each time. And yeah, that's always been our kind of intention. And now it's interesting, you know, the circumstances we currently find ourselves in, but even before that, it's kind of interesting to kind of, okay, why are we doing it in the way that we're doing it? Is that the best way we can be doing things? And kind of playing with the limits or the parameters or the expectations that you or your audience or your community have for how things are going to work is kind of an interesting one to kind of look at and kind of go, okay, well, why does it work in this way? And, you know, I think like being in Brighton is kind of a really interesting one for that. So obviously there, you know, if you're in a different city, if you're in London, you'd maybe have taken quite a different approach to how the event would work, how you format it, how the feel of it, how you communicate, how, you know, you design the elements that are designed there. And yeah, it's kind of strange that you don't know what some of it's kind of, it's beyond your control to some extent. You know, it's kind of the circumstances in which it occurs. And it's interesting to kind of go, okay, well, because we're in Brighton, we're doing it in a particular way. You know, because people are making the journey there, they're more likely to maybe stay than they would do for a London event. They're there for the full day. They want to come down to Brighton and stay for the weekend. How much, because we happen to choose a Friday for that first event, has that then meant that, well, it's got a Friday feeling that's slightly different to if it had been like a Tuesday event, and therefore people are more likely to maybe stay, have a bit more of a, you know, it becomes more social. And you never really know, you can't kind of untangle the various threads that have gone into it, but these kind of weird mixtures of, you know, strategy, random decisions, luck, all sort of mixed together to create an event or create a business or create a, you know, kind of community. And yeah, it's interesting to kind of, you know, given that now some of the formats that we're playing with perhaps either in the short term won't be the same and maybe in the longer term might be different as well. It's interesting to try and understand how that mixture fits together and what is the event, what is the community, what is the thing that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. That's really interesting, isn't it? Like you're saying, like the psychology of what day you've chosen to do something on will totally change the vibe. And obviously because, you know, the Brighton Centre is right on the beach, and I know that you start off with like a lot of kind of like social events to kind of get that like community going. It's really interesting. From your perspective, you were saying that in the beginning it was no different to the, you know, the meetups that go on in Brighton currently. What is it that you within you, because you mentioned your ego a little bit, which is interesting, like what is it within you that you think needed or had to expand this?
I mean, some of it I think is kind of down to marketing. So I've often sort of said that, you know, I am a marketer, right? You know, it's a marketing event. I'm a marketer. Was a search marketer. Now I'm you know, an event organizer really, rather than an SEO. But that's kind of, I come from that background, and it's often amazing to me. And this is maybe more less talking about meetups, but more kind of other conferences and exhibitions and trade shows and that kind of thing. It's amazing how many sort of marketing events aren't particularly well marketed for a variety of reasons. And for us early on, when we had the small venues, we were getting those sellouts that we got. And, you know, we lent into that, right? It's a scarcity thing. So we were able to kind of go, okay, how do we, market this, right? So, it was again that kind of, we've always come at it as kind of like a, there's lots of decisions we make in the event that are about making the event themselves better, but they're kind of always through a kind of marketing mindset, if that makes sense. So there's lots of things we'll be doing, when we were launching the event, we wanted it to do well on Twitter, right? So like the hashtag would be on all the signage, which sounds really stupid, but like 10 years ago, that was kind of not a super commonly, widespread thing to do. When we're, designing things or adding elements to the, the program or the layout, or we often put things like, we've got like in the Brighton Centre, when we moved from the Dome to the Brighton Centre, we suddenly had this much larger space that we could play with in the main auditorium there, because it held like 20,000 people or something stupid. So I'm like, well, what are we going to do with this space? And normally what you do if you were putting on a conference or event there, is you put in a really big stage, you get some really posh AV in, and kind of just do some nice screens and all that sort of stuff. Well, we went, well, that's going to cost, I don't know, 10 grand or whatever it was when we first went in there. And I went, well, why don't we just buy a camper van instead, like a VW Type 2 camper van? So we did that and had that for 2 or 3 years, where we kind of, drove that in, got some marquee lights on top of it, and then everyone wanted their photo taken in front of that. Now that's, again, kind of in our mind was, not necessarily thinking about things in the way a normal event organizer would, but it was also going, well, anyone who's at this event, obviously, hopefully it's going to be a good one, but I want them to take a picture that they put on Instagram, or they're putting on Facebook, or just that they remember, because like, it's like trying to kind of create some kind of impression or feeling or, connection to the event that's there. Because particularly in, professional marketing conferences and events, they're often not very distinct. They're the kind of like, you could be at, and they've often got, I won't say the names because it's a little bit kind of, cast of dispersions, but you'll kind of get these often kind of like whatever con, or like free letter that stands for something expo, or, like they're just very generic. And they often might do a very good job of kind of like, the talks might not really be that different to, what we have really. But well, we think we do a better job of program, but like fundamentally it's still people standing up on stage with a PowerPoint and talking, right?
Yes.
So it's off our views kind of been, well, how do you do the bits that are around that in a way that is more memorable, or
and engaging for your audience.
Hopefully that's what we're trying to do. Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that really does set you apart, in my mind. Not that I'm an expert on this, but is the just the community and the so we've before been like had some of your members from the Brighton SEO at the projects. We've given them day passes if they're going to Brighton SEO, and the people that come in, they all know each other, they've all spoken, they've all known each other from the years before, they're all really like, they've all got this common thread of people being really proud and happy to be coming to Brighton SEO. And I guess, like, how have you done that? How have you expanded this incredibly loyal community that you have?
Yeah, I think some of it's there anyway. Like, people, there's not, I sometimes wonder, is it kind of, is there something unique about the people that work in search marketing that mean that they kind of want to share and learn and, kind of build these connections across companies? I think there's some of that, right? There's obviously, there's some bits to the, the personality that gets you into that kind of discipline that maybe, is similar, that might be very different from, I don't know, if you're pediatricians or, whatever the profession is. But I think it's the same in all kinds of sectors, really, isn't it? It's just kind of like allowing it to happen, really, is maybe the all you can do. So for us, it's kind of been, that process of people like other people, right? They like getting together, they like learning from each other. They kind of, and I mean, I don't know if this is, I think this is unique to search, but we're fortunate, particularly in the creative industries, that obviously people might not, their job isn't their entirety of their personality, and that everyone's got hobbies and interests and all of it outside of that, but it's a big part of their life, right? You choose to do, and you obviously, hopefully, if you're fortunate, you like and enjoy and are passionate about what you do, and the ability to kind of share that passion with people who aren't your immediate colleagues is quite a powerful thing to be able to do. And I think people want to do that. and the best events, the best communities, and whether this is work or not, is allowing that kind of interest, that passion that people have, and allowing a forum for that, you know, caring that they've got for the topic, that desire to share and learn, just providing that, right? And I think that's, you know, where the best communities, the best events kind of come in, is they, you know, allow this excitement that people have about something, opportunity, a place to flourish.
Absolutely. I noticed that from a lot of the sort of the members of your community, like curiosity was really a big part of like the things that it seemed to be, that everyone was just like very curious and interested, and oh, you're doing this, and they're really helpful. I had some people, you know, somebody coming into the project and be like, oh, show me your Google My Business page, let me help you. And it was like, whoa, this is an amazing community. I guess like outside of the event itself, which is run twice a year, right?
Yeah, that's yeah. The main event is twice a year.
Yeah. How do you kind of provide like online platforms for people to stay in contact, or is it all just kind of naturally just happening?
I mean, we've not got that forum. There's a lot that kind of goes on social media, particularly on Twitter. Like we're kind of like an event that's how we started, and that's kind of, perhaps even though it might not be the biggest platform out there, it certainly is kind of spiritually our home, for want of a better description, of kind of we're facilitating that there. I mean, yeah, we've not kind of got that, and it's a shame actually. I think like it would be, you know, that I'm a bit, you know, I love forums as kind of like a thing that aren't, you know, maybe, and Facebook groups have sort of taken the place of that to some extent now as well, but that kind of yeah, that we don't have that year-round environment. But what is interesting is it means that there's a focus, that there's a, you know, kind of scarcity period of time where things are kind of concentrated, which I think events, and yeah, like in this kind of post-COVID-19 world, or transition, or whatever, however you want to frame that, is that's quite interesting. Is that obviously there are certain events businesses that are kind of fundamentally, it's a publication, right? So there's things going on year-round. That's never quite been our focus. Ours has always been, here's 6 months working on a thing, and that's quite interesting for us in the team, because lots of businesses, you're kind of, every day's the priority, there's a deadline every day, whereas ours is we spend 6 months working towards a thing that then happens, and then you just sort of step away from it, and you know, it's kind of sometimes hard to digest. Was it good? Was it bad? We don't really know. It's sort of, you've worked on that, kind of shifting to that kind of slightly different pattern of, well, are you doing things monthly? Are you doing things daily? What's your kind of schedule? What's your kind of tempo, your rhythm of your work? It's quite an interesting one to kind of go, that like, are we set up to do things twice a year, or is that just kind of an entirely random construct that I've got in my mind? But yeah, it's an interesting one that we've not got that year-round environment, but that doesn't prevent us from having the community there, because it's kind of ritual, I think, is, you know, ritual, routine and habit are
That's
big parts of it.
Ritual is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so it's... sorry.
No, please.
I can't even... yeah, I think it's one of those ones that's like, yeah, having a routine, or having something that's kind of in a diary, in the place there is powerful. And particularly if you can imagine people are going, it's in there already, you know, like it's, you know, like it's in their timeline of their year, right? That's kind of like a quite powerful place to be.
Absolutely. I'm just interested because what you do is very different to what I do. My job is very much day to day, and although we do, you know, have bigger strategies, what do you do anything in particular in terms of like, do you follow a particular project management or anything like that to have these 6 month events? Do you follow anything structured, or is all just
we're not like it's not like a methodology or philosophy, you know, kind of, you know, I mean, maybe there's a kind of agile approach to some of what we do, and you know, like, so there's a lot of like, when the event is happening, we're kind of like, so we've got like our team office where we're kind of going, okay, what I want from that event is, obviously I want it to go well, but I also want 100 things that we can do next time, or at least discuss, right? So it's kind of, well, what did we, you know, do better there? But there's not kind of a, yeah, we use Asana as a project management system. We're starting to kind of, we've certainly got better at like kind of going, well, what did we do last time? We probably need to do 90% of that again next time. So don't start from scratch. So there's a kind of understanding that we've got that stuff going on as well. And just, yeah, I mean, I think, again, when you're talking about kind of like psychologies or philosophies of business, we're quite task orientated. So we'll, you know, we use Asana, we create a task and kind of go, okay, here's the thing that needs to be done by a point in time. And that, you know, allows us to do things there. But it's amazing to me, at least, we've kind of come at it not necessarily originally from an event. Well, I'm not from an event organisation background. Is that, so we've got like 120 speakers. So there's lots of speakers, and we'll do things like, okay, if you're a speaker at one of our events, we would like you to fill in this Google form that gives us the information. That means there's a spreadsheet that we've got for the contact details, the bio of their Twitter account, of all this sort of stuff. And lots of events just don't do that, right? So they've got like emails, and maybe the email is kind of then copied into a spreadsheet somewhere that's shared on a shared drive or something. But yeah, there's lots of bits like that where it's like, I think we've ended up being quite efficient, and some of that's come from because we've come at it from a different approach. But sometimes it's just because like we're a small team. We were, you know, initially run on an absolute shoestring budget. Obviously it's a bit kind of more substantial now. We've kind of come from that, and like Tom, who's like our operations director, kind of came from an arts background, so he's very used to, you know, working on arts council funded projects that don't have huge budgets to spend. So kind of come at it from we're not that kind of corporate event planning where they're doing, you know, 20 conferences a year and they're going to spend, you know, it's an oil and gas event this week and then a pharmaceuticals event the following week, and, you know, they're throwing money at problems. We've kind of been a little bit more kind of, starting small and trying small things out and trying to go, what's the cheapest way we can achieve this thing that we want to do? And actually sometimes that gives you, so it's sometimes amazing how much you still end up doing it the way that everyone else does, but like the process we like to go through is kind of go, oh, let's do it in this slightly complicated way that's you know, and sometimes that works quite well.
Absolutely, and those restrictions, I really emphasize with that, having a really small team. Like the restrictions that you have just force you to just be like, what do we need? What's the absolute essential? Let's like, we don't need like all of this other stuff that's going on. So absolutely, if you found a way to streamline that experience for the collaborators and the contributors, just to have it all in there and it's done, then that's not somebody, you know, you don't have to hire an admin person then to do all of those other things. So really,
yeah, definitely. I think so. Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, it forces small businesses like yours to be creative with it. There's so much collaboration that goes into making Brighton SEO happen, and that's what kind of the series that we're doing is about. Can you just tell us, I mean, how you find your contributors, how you collaborate with your team, like what collaboration kind of means to Brighton SEO?
Yeah, I mean, so the team itself is distributed remote and flexible working as well. So we've always been in that kind of framework there. So, I mean, there's a bit of a Brighton focus to that. So probably of our core team of 6 or so, 4, I'm in Worthing, Tom's in Hassocks, Nicola's in Brighton, Joe's in Brighton. So there's kind of like a geographic, so it means we can get together. But actually, you know, a sign that was kind of a good one was Carrie, our designer, moved from Worthing to France. And a couple of the team didn't realise, you know, not because it was a kind of like a secret or anything, just because it just hadn't come up in conversation. It's kind of like, well, where you are to me doesn't really make any difference. So, but in doing that, it's kind of that, yeah, it relies on kind of a shared understanding of how we work. And I think that's kind of what kind of collaboration within a team is kind of where I've seen it struggle in other businesses and other roles, is where there's different expectations of how you're going to work. And, you know, there are things like, so yeah, we don't really do phone calls. We don't really do meetings. We're kind of assuming a sort of asynchronous sort of communication method. So it's a kind of, well, I don't know when I'll do the things that I'm going to do and get all my work kind of spread out, and then I'll kind of go on a bike ride, right? And that's kind of the frame of how I work. And I'll know that someone else in the team will pick it up whenever they've got their 2 hours that they're going to be working on things. And that, you know, but if you all understand that, that's brilliant. Where we've had kind of like some like less successful hires or less successful kind of people we work with, has been where they've kind of expected more of a, okay, well, let's have our 2-hour meeting now. And it's like, that's not our kind of way of working. So kind of, yeah, to collaborate with your team, you kind of, what we maybe we get better at over time is kind of articulating what that culture is. We kind of know what it is, but kind of,
well, to me, that's a culture of trust. That's a culture of just knowing that you've got the right team who are like in the right parts, and they know that, like, if you've got everything out in Asana, you've got everything, that you've got all your tasks, people are going to pick this up. You don't need to be, behind them nipping at their heels to do something. And that to me is like sounds like what a big part of your team culture is.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not necessarily the right way. It's just the way that, that kind of we operate, is that, like, I'm not I kind of assume I'm getting all my stuff, and because I'm assuming other people are, and actually the team are, right? But yeah, there's different teams have different psychologies and different kind of approaches that they would use. And for us, that's kind of, but it's about that being, ideally, I imagine you kind of articulate that and you can kind of say, well, do you think you could work with this when you're starting? But strangely, kind of over the years, I think the kind of people we've worked with where it's just kind of been a brief, let's have a chat and a coffee in a cafe and get on well, and then kind of do a little bit of work with them. And if we do a little bit of work with them, it works well, so we do more work with them, and you kind of try things and see if they work, and they do more of them. And actually, bizarrely, I think sometimes when you think about it too much, you can kind of not end up, the serendipity and trying things out is often the best way to see if things are going to work, I think.
Absolutely. It's really interesting that's kind of like a common thread of how you speak about how the evolution of Brighton SEO is, that a lot of it is about like the alchemy of strategy, and then luck, and then personalities, and then your personal drive and the drive of the team, and that is what business is. And sometimes it can be a fault to kind of have such a rigid plan for a business. You don't allow for this creativity and expanse to
I mean, I think it's different ways of doing things, isn't it? I mean, there are, like, certainly we make mistakes and do things wrong that wouldn't be appropriate for other types of ways of doing things. And and hopefully, like it's like a classic one is that we did we launched an online event last week, a couple of weeks ago, and we mucked up a URL in the email that we sent out on it. And it's kind of, on the one hand, I'm kind of, oh, well, why didn't we check or spot that? But it's like, well no, because that's how that's how we work. It's like, we're not that, you don't ever want to make mistakes or ever do things wrong, but you kind of have to go, well, if you're getting the benefit of this, try things out, learn from your mistakes, do things better next time. You can't then also simultaneously get it right 100% of the time, or 99%. You have to kind of take the rough with the smooth there. And obviously there's certain kind of organizations or certain kinds of, entrepreneurs or founders or management teams that kind of, it's a reflection of their approaches. And, that's kind of, there's different ways of doing that, but it's kind of being, fair about that. And where I've had more challenges in the past is where you rub up against a different way of doing things. And I mean, it's naive to think that your way is the best way. It's just a different way of doing things.
Absolutely. And well, it's like, that's what was particularly in Brighton, there's so many different businesses doing so many different ways, and that's what makes such a rich environment for so many employees or people who want to collaborate, because you can kind of find your niche and kind of find your sweet spot. And we're all humans and animals, and we're all going to react to each other in different ways, so there's going to be no way to all do it exactly the same way each time. So obviously you've now got this kind of experience of it's come from very small space to a huge event. And I guess, like, how do you effectively bring together so many different parties to make an event come together?
I mean, it's tricky. I mean, some of it is just kind of making things simple for people. So knowing what you want from them when, and accepting that no one's perfect in that. So like for us, it will be like, okay, we've got 120 speakers. So we can't have conversations with all of them about everything that's required. Like, it needs to be kind of a bit, there is a standard speaker document, there's a standard set of deadlines that we share. We put them in people's diaries rather than kind of leave it just in the email. So there's a calendar invite and bits in there. We know that, like, slides particularly, there's going to be, no one ever hits the deadline. So we don't make the deadline, right? We kind of go, okay, well, we need it now, knowing that, like, no one's going to hit that deadline. So we actually ask for it 2 weeks ahead of time. So kind of being realistic about those things and being clear with what you need from people, and hopefully a kind of a transparent way, hopefully makes that kind of collaboration with lots of people. So you're kind of clear what you need from people, when you need from them. And hopefully that then means that then the bits that if you're maybe task-based is, I don't know, a way that I've mentioned before, but by kind of being clear about what do you need the collaboration on, is if you're kind of removing all of the ambiguity, that then when there's the bit of the creativity bit is hopefully easier, right? So yeah, with lots of those kind of bits there as well. But again, it's about trust as well. So kind of we're, with the team, we've got like a freelance team who come together to program, to deliver the event. So there's like, I don't know, 6 or 7 of us working on it most of the year round. But then during the event, there's like, I don't know, about 80 who are directly by us, before you get to the AV people, before you get to the venue people, before you get to all of that sort of stuff. And in most cases, it's just about having the right people there in the right jobs, doing the right things, and sort of trusting them to get on with it is, a big part of that kind of collaboration process. Is sometimes it's easy to think, okay, collaboration just means the manager or whoever wants to be involved in everything. Whereas actually it's like, no, kind of going, okay, these people can solve this problem, let them get on with it. And as long as you sort of set some of the parameters, or there's kind of a cultural understanding of, how the company would do things, that hopefully lines it up nicely.
Is that something that comes quite naturally to you, to step away and to be able to delegate?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask the team if I'm very good at that. I'm not detail focused in the way, like, I think some people are very meticulous. And I would definitely say, that's not a quality of mine, which has it, like, in some ways has its benefits, right? Because you're able to kind of go, well, yeah, I like the but then I do still get involved. I have a kind of, but that's kind of the constant challenge, really, isn't it? In anyone's professional life, is knowing where they're being helpful and adding value, and knowing where they're not. And I don't think I always get that right, but kind of that's my personal professional development things, is kind of going, well, actually, where am I? What bits of what we do am I helping? And the reality is in lots of cases, I'm not the best person to be doing it, right? Either because I'm not very good at that skill set, or it's more economical for someone else to be doing that. So I'm doing, it's kind of that matching of stuff is important as well. But yeah, I mean, kind of knowing yourself helps, doesn't it? I mean, whether you've got the self-awareness to see your strengths and weaknesses is hopefully helpful.
Absolutely. Just changing tack just a little bit. So Brighton SEO was obviously due to take place in April. We're recording this just as lockdown's kind of starting to ease. But obviously that's slightly controversial in Brighton, where we've had lots of people coming down to the beaches, and we won't get into any of that. But what I'm interested in is, obviously coronavirus put a stop to Brighton SEO happening. How have you adapted? How have your team adapted to that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. So, I mean, ours is kind of the events industry as a whole has been, I mean, so many industries have been affected, but, the events industry, it's really, kind of disrupted in a way that, like, we were aware quite early on that it might have an impact, but I don't think we kind of like fully had appreciated. I think we were probably, we have relationships with other event organisers who had events in Singapore, for example, who were being affected a lot earlier than we were. So kind of we didn't, we were aware of, and we're taking a series of steps to kind of manage that for our April event. And we postponed April on the 13th of of March, and it kind of decided a few days prior to that, and I had to get quite a few bits in line to sort of to do that. But yeah, it kind of, but that was the same day the Premier League went, and it's kind of the sequencing of things was interesting there. So we had the fortunate situation of, we had a full 6 weeks, maybe 5 weeks by the time we actually announced. So there was plenty of time to kind of pre-warn people. Lots of people were kind of starting to realise it was likely to be the case, though it wasn't, like a week afterwards, it was like, of course they were going to cancel it. But a week before would have been, well, why would they? And kind of it's ended up in the middle there. But we were fortunate enough to, we had lots of tickets sold. We had lots of sponsor relationships kind of confirmed. We were able to just move them to our October event. So that kind of moved, which now makes the October event different to how lots of event organisers are. So many will have either kind of cancelled their event or were originally planning to do an autumn event and don't have that kind of lead in for an event, particularly if it's an annual event. Kind of, you might do a lot of work in the first 6 months, but it's only like in that last 3 that you really make the money that makes an event viable. So we're quite fortunate that we've kind of got that. So we've got ticket sales in place for October, sponsorship relationships there. We're doing a variety of online things over the summer because we now have the time to do them that we wouldn't have previously had. And we're kind of interested in exploring. So we give a lot of our tickets away for free in a ballot. We have 9,000 people applying for 1,500 free tickets. So already we've got this group of people who they weren't able to come to the event. So we've always had this kind of unmet demand that we've got there. But now, the big challenge in the events industry is kind of knowing, obviously back to normal is going to be a long journey, but where we will be at when is kind of, maybe unknowable. So you've kind of got the situation where you're planning for a variety of possible outcomes that you don't really know what's going to be the case. It's like, will events of a decent scale be legal in October? Will they be legal, but venues won't want to do them for a variety of reasons? Will they be available, but there's a limit on the number of people that can attend? Even if there isn't those limits, are people who are coming from 40 different countries, will they want to travel? So there's lots of kind of unknowns within that you don't really know. But it's also interesting to me. So I was looking at this yesterday. So back in, I think it might have been the couple of days after we had postponed the event, back in March, I did not a huge survey of about 500 people, friends and kind of people like that, and broader contacts, asking them when they thought they could be back. When would you have a pint in the pub? That was kind of my question, is when, obviously things aren't normal now, but when do you think that would be the case? And there were a variety of people who were saying 2 weeks away, which obviously was naive. And then other people saying I don't know, December 2021. But when you tallied them up, the most popular answer was the 1st of June. But if you looked at the median, so you took all of them, found what the middle date was, that was the 1st of July. And if you actually took the most popular day was the 1st of June, then the 31st of June, and then the 1st of July. So if you take that weekend or those 2 days, that was the most popular one. And to be honest, that might not be that different from...
No, I wonder if that's what Boris is basing his...
Yeah, so it's kind of this very strange situation. It's it feels like everything's slipping, or it's changing, or it's... And I think that's kind of the weirdest thing, I think, for an event organizer at the moment, is kind of going, oh, well, people underreact, they overreact, they correct, and the news will be one thing one day, one thing the next day. And I think that's is probably what I've found the hardest. Obviously, people who are dealing with the serious consequences of where we're at is obviously much more serious. But in my kind of situation, the uncertainty has been kind of the hardest thing to deal with, rather than any of the kind of consequences. So, if I think most event organisers would rather know their event as they plan it couldn't occur, to then do something that appeals to and responds to their community in the way that they best possibly can. The challenge is knowing what I thought 6 weeks ago, what I thought 4 weeks ago, what I thought 2 weeks ago, what I thought a week ago, changed. And it's quite hard. And even looking back on them, you don't even remember them in the way you did at the time. And I think looking forward, we will see that as well. So that kind of ability to sort of understand that, yeah, you think what your current view was always your view, and it's kind of hard to unravel that sometimes. And I think that could be interesting in terms of, you know, kind of the consequences of where we end up heading soon. It's like, I think everyone, after all of this, is whenever the return to normal is, will have thought that whatever they viewed at that point in time was the right thing to do. And I think that's kind of weird, right? The tricks our minds play on ourselves in terms of that kind of, well, of course I thought that was a good idea at that point in time. Then you look back at your Facebook and Twitter updates at the time, kind of going, yeah, that's not what I thought, and I didn't think it then.
What is it? That's like cognitive. Is it assonance? That's what we're
cognitive dissonance. Is it dissonance? I don't know. Yeah.
Dissonance. Yeah. One of them. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a really interesting thing. That like kind of. Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Is the uncertainty. I mean, as an event organizer, it's pretty that you know, you have uncertainties about like how many tickets you're going to sell, but obviously because you have a demand, you know, you're going to do that, you know, just making sure, you know, if a speaker goes sick, or, you know, all those things which you can mitigate against those. I mean, how are you dealing with this uncertainty for October? What are you able to kind of put into play?
Well, I mean, to some extent it's having plans, having options that you can explore. The other one is also kind of accepting that you need time to pass, right? So like this is like quite strange situation about it is kind of knowing, well, yeah, like you know, that we will know more in July than we knew at the start of July than we do at the start of June, and that's kind of weird because you kind of want to know now, but you also have to accept that kind of you're not going to be able to deal with that. So it's like, what can you do in that intervening time until you get that certainty that is not going to do any harm and it's going to do some value? And I think that's this strange kind of hibernation situation that lots of businesses have found themselves in. As I imagine a challenge is kind of knowing, you know, what am I going to do that's going to be most helpful, most useful, whilst managing the real world and real life as well is a challenge. Yeah, definitely, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what, like as for other event organizers who would be watching this and kind of going, you know, what can I do to kind of add value? I mean, is there anything specific that BrightonSEO have been doing?
Well, we've been trying to so for us, it's been about trying to understand and challenge our views on why we've done things in the way that we have. Right. So it's kind of, you know, for us, it's like, okay, we've launched a series of online conferences around specialist topics that we can do. And, you know, for us, that kind of was a bit about kind of going, okay, well, it's to deliver some value to our sponsors. There's a commercial reality in why we're doing them. But it's also kind of to experiment, to go, okay, well, if we can't do October, could we do a virtual event there? If we can do October, but some people might not travel, how do we provide a virtual version of that? And longer term kind of going, well, actually, so like one of the big things we did do is we offset all of the flights, even though they now didn't occur, of all of our speakers internationally. So we get an increasing number of international speakers, and we had offset all of their, you know, the carbon impact of their flights. And like that's been kind of in the back of my mind even before this started, is that I'm hugely proud that people are prepared to travel immense distances to come and, you know, attend our event. And, you know, obviously there's a lot we do in the event that I think is really like, I love that people love the merchandise that we do, and, you know, they wear the t-shirts, they've got the mugs, all of that sort of stuff. But I also find it problematic that there's like quite a real, you know, environmental impact to a lot of what's occurring there. So like, I'm kind of seeing it as potentially that this is maybe moving us in a direction towards maybe treating international travel or air travel in a slightly different way. And that might not be such a bad thing. So kind of we're going, well, how do we use that? There are certain similarities of what's occurring here that may well be trends that were going to occur anyway. And I've heard this, I forget who like originally said it, but it's kind of this interesting things that crises like this often don't really change the route that future was taking. It just accelerates it, if you see what I mean. So it's kind of like trends that were going to, you know, things around the high street, things around, you know, food delivery and, you know, all of this sort of stuff were a direction of travel, and it's probably just moved things on quite significantly maybe it's like 5 years worth of progress in, you know, 5 months. And that's maybe the way for business owners and event owners to kind of go, well, what trends that were going to occur anyway, is this just precipitating, and how can you respond to that? And for us, it's kind of gone, well, yes, obviously there is a huge value in meeting your peers in a kind of physical environment that is enjoyable, that you go away energized and motivated by. But our kind of view is like, well, we've got a limitation that there's already many more people who want to attend the event than is possible. So our view is kind of, well, how can we reach a larger audience that gets some of that value, and then potentially allow people who are, at the moment felt they had to travel to or had to attend to get that value. And there will be certain people in certain circumstances where maybe they don't need to occur quite as frequently. We're fortunate that like there will be other people who can come in their place, but you know, that's kind of maybe, whereas in the past I'd maybe have gone, okay, well, how do I make it so I can get a bigger venue, or, you know, wishing that the Brighton are meant to be building this additional conference and arena at some point in the future, and kind of urging that on as soon as possible for us. Now kind of going, well, maybe actually our numbers are fine, and what we need to be doing is allowing people to attend and participate in a variety of ways that they couldn't have done before. So I don't know if I even went anywhere near what the question was there, but like that's kind of some of the patterns of the things that, yeah, we're kind of thinking about.
Well, that's it. What you're talking about is just like using this time to reflect on what your original, well, I guess what your structure and your purpose of your business is, and then well, not your purpose, so that's remaining the same, but how you can kind of translate that to a wider audience. We're talking about getting your speakers from abroad and people, lots of speakers wanting to come. I mean, how does that process work? Do you kind of research and try and find speakers, or do people come to you?
We have a pitch process now where people apply to speak. So we're very fortunate now that like actually our process, like early days was very much who did we want to speak, and now people come to us. And actually that's interesting because like for us there's all kinds of challenges about trying to make that as high quality as possible, but we're also fortunate that I know, because we're multi-track, because of the way that our demand for tickets works, we're able to take chances on speakers who perhaps other events might struggle to. So if you're a single track event trying to sell a ticket for 500 quid, your speaker selection process is very different to one where the tickets are sold out already, they haven't even looked at the speaker lineup. You know, you're kind of doing it in a different way. So that allows us to take a slightly different approach to who we're speaking. And fortunately for us now, we get a huge amount of people putting those pictures in. So many more than we can do. And actually, interestingly, these online ones, again, is kind of quite a nice advantage to that. So there are kind of, you know, we rolled all of our speaking, you know, ideas from April to October. So I've got 6 months worth of excellent speaker ideas that I've got nothing to do, you know, no means of an outlet for them. So yeah, we're fortunate that that's there. We've still got to do work to ensure that like the people who are putting themselves forward are, you know, representative of our audience is one area. But also kind of going, well, let's just not choose, you know, the most obvious, you know, speakers that we've got. And that's kind of I enjoy that aspect of, I'm still very, like, that's probably one of the areas that I would be last to give up on is the programming of the topics. And yeah, that's kind of the way that we do that. So yeah, we're fortunate that we've kind of done that, but it's been a process over a period of time of going, well, let's encourage people to pitch in this way. Let's encourage, we offer speaker coaching. We offer, you know, we make clear that we want to hear from people who aren't well known, who aren't, you know, the same 20, 30 people who speak at all of the other events. And they're very good, those people, but they're at all the other events. So like, it's like, we're fortunate that we don't need to kind of go, who's got the most Twitter following? We're kind of going, well, who do we think would appreciate speaking? So like, and also we quite like that there's people who have gone through that who maybe didn't give them their big break or anything like that, but, you know, like we kind of gave them an early opportunity to showcase their talent. And the rapport that we then have with them is that then when they are going off and setting off their own businesses, their own agencies, they're running their own departments, they're sending that team along. When, you know, it's all kind of this, you know, kind of virtuous sort of circle we've got going on.
That's so cool. The speaker coaching thing is a really interesting thing as well, because obviously the tech world can kind of, if people aren't doing a more inclusive approach, it can become a bit of a club, of an undiverse club. So I imagine that the coaching of people who are less confident to come and speak, offering them that platform is really valuable. Do you kind of do that before the pitching, or after?
So yeah, it would be a kind of where we have selected the speak, and it is still self-selecting in as much as like someone's got to put themselves forward. But what it allows us to do, hopefully, is normally when you're selecting who an event, they're selecting who to speak, they've got to kind of go who is currently most able to, whereas we can kind of go and we're then able to judge on the quality of the idea that they've got rather than the experience speaking that they've got, because we're confident that the ability they've got to talk about the topic is more important anyway, and even with that, that there's things that we can do or that they can do that will allow them to do the best possible job that they can. And actually, I think it's and there's other things as well. Like again, like our programming we do a little bit differently. So this is for our benefit, but like rather than kind of go, this person they look like they're a main stage speaker, right? They're going to be really good. What we do instead is kind of put all of the talks together into the groups that they're going to be, and then get the audience to vote on what's on which stage. And like sometimes that validates what I would have suggested, but it often doesn't. It often challenges that. I kind of go, I was convinced that, like, you know, Speaker Jane and Speaker Joe and, you know, were definitely the most popular, and that topic's a really popular one, and then it doesn't get any votes, right? But then some absolute, you know, newcomers have really they know that they've got a really good idea there that we were able to identify was a good idea to be a talk, but we didn't realize was going to be the most popular. So that then allows you, again, the kind of the audience and the attendees this ability to do that. And that makes me the most proud, actually, is when I see someone who kind of this is my first big speaking engagement and I'm here in front of 3,000 people. You know, that's kind of, to me, meant we've done a good job, right? Because we've selected a topic that was, they pitched the topics, they did the really hard bit, but like we've kind of been able to extract that was something that might well work, and then allow the system to sort of percolate through and do that, rather than kind of going, I've seen this person speak at 6 other events, and therefore they're definitely a good speaker. And yeah, but we're fortunate that our business model allows us to do that in a way that I think if we had more a traditional conference, single track, or, you know, high ticket price where the names are selling to do them, it's a glib comparison, but it means it's much different. I imagine it's very different programming Glastonbury than it is another festival, right? That's kind of starting out, because the Glastonbury, the tickets are selling, right? They don't need to, like, they know that they trust that they're going to have a really good time there anyway, and that the music selection process. So obviously it's a very different environment, but like that allows a sort of degree of flexibility that like perhaps other people don't have.
So it's really interesting, and yeah, you're totally right. It's interesting when you talk about your business model, and you do use the words sort of like fortunate and luck, but I'm really like, from the way you speak and the way that the methodology on how you design everything that goes into BrightonSEO, it's obvious that your background is in marketing, and it's obviously really feeding into that, from, you know, surveying your audience to, you know, testing what works to, you know, just putting out into your audience exactly what is needed. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a leading question, but like, do you think that is what kind of sets apart BrightonSEO in terms of an event?
I mean, I think, yeah, we're prepared to ask questions and listen to them in a way that, like, obviously is, yeah, that's kind of a way that we do that. And sometimes, like, we're doing that leadingly as well. So it's like, do you think we should do this thing that, like, yeah, we've probably already decided, or, you know, 90% decided that we're going to do. And then when the audience tell us it's a good idea, it's like, well, fantastic. Like, you know, I'm perfectly up for doing that to settle an argument where it's like, I think this is a good idea, so I'll try and make it so that, you know, if I think this is a good idea and Joe thinks that's a good idea, we'll ask the audience, and my hope is that they'll agree with my way, but then often they will. But, you know, like, you're kind of doing it in that framework. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I am a marketer, you know, there's a lot of kind of this kind of, I don't know, wanky business stuff that you can get, that like organizations might be product-led organizations, there might be sales-led, or, you know, I think there's an element of that to that, but also I'm indecisive, like, so again, that's kind of like, well, actually, if I can go, like, so the process of putting the speakers on which stage, where we then ask the audience, that was driven by me getting annoyed with attendees saying, well, why did you put this speaker on in a smaller stage that was then too small, rather than this speaker on that stage, and that was nowhere near as good? And I was like, because I thought it was the right thing to do. And it's like, well, how do I avoid that criticism, I will throw it to the audience. Not we'll still get the same criticism, but like at least I've now got a response that I kind of go, they're like, well, why did you put that topic on in that tiny room? It's because when we asked the audience, they said that that was less popular than this other topic that we did. So yeah, that's kind of in our DNA maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelvin, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I can imagine myself really getting carried
Sorry,
away.
when I get going as well, I apologise
No,
as
it's
well.
really
So, yeah.
fascinating to hear how it's all come together. I mean, I guess like, but my last question really is like where everyone can like find out about the Brighton SEO, and if they want to speak, how do they go about the pitching process, like, and what you guys are up to right now.
Yep, so our main homes are BrightonSEO.com and on Twitter /BrightonSEO. We're always on the lookout for speakers, and no matter how like unconnected it might seem to the topic, that's actually usually a good thing. There's a form up under speakers and pitch to speak there that we're kind of keen to do that. And our kind of plan at the moment is just keep plugging away and see what autumn holds. And we're kind of confident that we're gonna do something that makes our community very, very happy, and hopefully it'll be as near as possible to what we had intended, but it probably won't be. So we're then trying to find what's the way through that's as core to our mission or like way of doing things as we possibly can, and then hopefully learn from that, and that'll make even obviously some kind of external influence on things is going to take things in a different direction, but I'm confident that we will learn from it, and it will hopefully make the event better in the future from it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kelvin. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you. And thank you also for watching. So you can also find out more about the projects on all of our channels, which is the Projects BTN. And thank you again, Kelvin. And to find all the information about Brighton SEO, we'll put it in our description bit below. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of Working Together.
Bye.